Imagine the grandest funeral procession in the ancient world. Thousands of soldiers in silent formation, priests chanting solemn rites, and a river of treasures, jade, silk, and gold, flowing into a magnificent tomb built to house an emperor for all eternity. It's a display of unimaginable power and wealth. But for dozens of women hidden within the procession, this ceremony wasn't the end of their grief. It was the beginning of their own burial. They were not there to mourn their emperor. They were there to join him forever. This is the chilling, forgotten story of China's imperial concubines and the terrifying tradition that demanded the ultimate sacrifice for loyalty, being buried alive. In the vast and opulent world of imperial China, the emperor was more than just a ruler. He was the son of heaven, a demigod on earth, whose life was meant to be a paradise. And a key part of that paradise was his harem, a sprawling city within a city, home to hundreds, sometimes thousands of women. These women were the imperial concubines. From a distance, their life seemed like a dream. They lived in palaces adorned with fragrant woods and shimmering silks. They wore jewels that could ransom a kingdom and ate delicacies prepared by the finest chefs. They were surrounded by beauty and luxury, but this gilded cage had bars of steel. A woman chosen for the emperor's court had her past erased. She left her family, her friends, and her old life behind, entering the forbidden city with a new name and a single purpose: to please the emperor. Her entire existence revolved around him. Her value, her safety, and her very survival depended on catching his eye and holding his favor. Life in the harem was a silent, high-stakes game of chess. Every smile, every word, every gesture was a calculated move. Friendships were dangerous, as the woman you confided in one day could become your rival the next. The competition was relentless, fueled by loneliness and the desperate hope for a better position, or better yet, to bear the emperor a son. This would grant her status, security, and a future. Without it, she was just a beautiful ghost, drifting through palatial gardens, waiting for a summons that might never come. They were masters of poetry, music, and art, yet they had no freedom. They were draped in riches, yet they owned nothing. Their entire world was confined to the palace walls, and their destiny was tied to the health and happiness of one man. As long as the emperor lived, this delicate, dangerous balance could be maintained. But what happened when the Son of Heaven died? When the emperor's final breath left his body, a wave of profound uncertainty and fear would wash over the Forbidden City. For the empire, it meant a new ruler. For his ministers, a shift in power. But for the women of the harem, especially those who had never borne the emperor a child, it was a terrifying moment of reckoning. Their protector, the center of their universe, was gone, and in his place stood a chilling tradition, an ancient belief that the emperor must not travel to the afterlife alone. This practice was known as zang, or accompanying in death. The idea was that the emperor's tomb should be a perfect replica of his earthly court. He would need his guards to protect him, his officials to advise him, and of course, his favorite companions to serve and entertain him for eternity. And this meant his concubines. While the practice had existed in earlier dynasties, it was revived with a terrifying ferocity during the Ming Dynasty, founded in the 14th century by a formidable peasant-turned-emperor named Zhu Yuanzhang, better known as the Hongwu Emperor. The Hongwu Emperor was a brilliant but ruthless ruler, known for his deep paranoia and iron-fisted control. He trusted few people and saw conspiracies everywhere. He built a powerful dynasty, but he did so through brutal purges and unwavering demands for absolute loyalty. And he expected that loyalty to follow him beyond the grave. When the Hongwu Emperor died in 1398, his grand tomb was ready. It was a sprawling complex, a palace for the afterlife. And his final decree was clear. His concubines were to join him. According to historical records, at least 46 women were chosen to be his companions in death. Imagine the atmosphere in the harem in the days following his passing. The official mourning ceremonies would be elaborate and public, but behind the closed doors of the women's quarters, there would be a silent, creeping terror. Who would be chosen? The selection process was cruel and shrouded in mystery. It was likely a political decision made by the new emperor and his advisors. Perhaps they chose the old emperor's favorites to honor his memory, or perhaps they chose the ones they saw as potential threats, women who were too ambitious, too beautiful, or who came from influential families that could challenge the new regime. Once the names were read out, the fate of these women was sealed. There was no appeal, no escape. They were given a final ceremonial banquet. Some historians suggest the wine they were served may have been drugged with opium to dull their senses, a small, final mercy before the inevitable. After the feast, they were led to a chamber within the palace. There they would find silk cloths or white scarves hanging from the crossbeams. They were expected to end their own lives. It was presented as a final act of honor, a demonstration of their undying devotion. Court eunuchs would stand by to assist any who hesitated. It was a cold, calculated, and horrifying procedure. These women, who had spent their lives in service to one man, were now forced to make the ultimate sacrifice for him. But for some, an even more terrifying fate awaited. Another method of shunzang was far more direct. The chosen women were led, along with servants and guards, deep into the heart of the emperor's tomb. They were placed in the chambers surrounding the emperor's coffin, sometimes with musical instruments or other familiar objects from their lives. They were meant to be a living tableau, a court frozen in time. Then the stonemasons would come forward. With methodical precision, they would seal the great stone door of the burial chamber, plunging the interior into absolute darkness. The air would grow thin. The final sounds would be the scraping of stone on stone. And then silence, an eternal, suffocating silence. It's an end that is almost impossible for us to comprehend. To be left alone in the dark, deep beneath the earth, waiting for the end. These weren't just numbers in a history book. They were living, breathing women. Women who had families, who had once had dreams of their own before they were chosen for the palace. They felt fear, they felt despair, and in those last moments, they were utterly alone. So, why did this happen? Why would a civilization as sophisticated as Imperial China embrace such a brutal practice? The reasons are complex, a mixture of belief, power, and politics. The primary justification was spiritual. Ancient Chinese beliefs about the afterlife were very literal. They believed the soul continued to exist and required all the same comforts and services it had in life. An emperor without his retinue in the spirit world was a lonely and powerless figure. To deny him his companions was to disrespect his eternal status and potentially bring misfortune upon the dynasty. To the court, it wasn't seen as cruelty, but as a necessary continuation of their sacred duty. But beyond religion, there was a powerful political motive. Burying the old emperor's childless concubines was a brutally effective way of cleaning the slate. It ensured that there were no lingering attachments or rival power bases connected to the previous reign. A young, beautiful concubine favored by the dead emperor could, in theory, become a problem for the new emperor's mother, the Empress Dowager. She might have allies at court or secrets that could be used for political blackmail. By eliminating these women, the new regime secured its power and removed any potential complications. It was also the ultimate demonstration of an emperor's power. His authority was so absolute that it transcended the boundary between life and death. His possessions, including the people he considered his property, were his for eternity. This sent a clear message to everyone in the empire. The emperor's will is law, in this life and the next. For nearly a century, this practice continued within the Ming Dynasty. The Hongwu Emperor's successor, the Yongle Emperor, the man who built the Forbidden City in Beijing and commissioned the famous treasure fleets, also had at least 16 concubines join him in his mausoleum. The tradition was passed down, a dark inheritance from one emperor to the next. Each time a ruler died, a quiet tragedy unfolded in the inner sanctums of the palace. But traditions, even those set in stone, can be broken. The change came from an emperor who had experienced profound loss and hardship himself. The Zhengtong Emperor, the great-great-grandson of the man who revived the practice, had a turbulent reign. He was captured by the Mongols in battle and held prisoner for a year. During that time, he was dethroned by his own brother. He eventually regained power, but his experiences seemed to have given him a perspective that his predecessors lacked. He understood suffering. As he lay on his deathbed in 1464, he thought of the women who would be forced to follow him. He knew the terror they would face. And in a final act of compassion, he gave a decree that would echo through history. He declared that the practice of zang was to be abolished. He could not bear, he said, to have his concubines sacrificed. He wanted to set a better example for his descendants. With that final command, a century of ritualized death came to an end. It was a stunning break from tradition, a moment of humanity that shone through the rigid dogma of the imperial court. From that point on, no emperor of the Ming Dynasty or the Qing Dynasty that followed would ever again force their consorts to accompany them in death. So how do we know these stories are true? We know because of the silent witnesses left behind. Archaeologists excavating the massive burial sites of the early Ming emperors have found evidence that confirms the historical texts. Alongside the main burial chamber, they have discovered other rooms containing the remains of numerous women. In some cases, the skeletons are found in poses that suggest a violent or sudden end. They are accompanied by the chests that held their personal belongings, jewelry, combs, and cosmetics they were meant to use in the afterlife. These tombs are somber, tragic places. They are not just historical sites, they are grave sites for forgotten victims. The treasures they contain are overshadowed by the human cost they represent. The story of China's forgotten concubines is a powerful reminder that behind the grandeur and glory of empire, there is often a hidden story of immense personal sacrifice. These women have no names in our history books. They are often just a number, a statistic in the record of an emperor's funeral. But they were more than that. They were individuals, trapped in a system that demanded everything from them. First, their freedom and life, and then life itself. Their tragic end serves as a haunting testament to the extremes of absolute power and the human cost of traditions that value loyalty above life. Their stories, once sealed in stone, are now brought into the light, reminding us that behind every grand monument of history, there are silent sacrifices and forgotten tears. If you found this story compelling, consider subscribing for more journeys into the untold corners of history.